Canadians started this year with Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister, but that changed quickly on January 6th, to be exact, when Justin Trudeau stepped down, saying he didn't have the support of his caucus to stay on. At that point, Liberals were on average between 20 and 30 points behind the Conservatives in public opinion polls. But with the advent of Trump and a new leader as of March in Mark Carney, the tides turned and the Liberals won a fourth consecutive mandate. At the time, a handful of seats short of a majority. Let's bring back the front bench to talk about that. Christy Clark, Marco Mendicino, James Moore, and Tony Clement. Christy, I'll start with you. If we had this conversation a year ago, is this the outcome you think you would have predicted? And what do you attribute to it?
Well, I mean, Pierre Poilievre had the gimme election of all gimme elections. It seemed to me ridiculous, crazy to imagine that Liberals could somehow win the election. We were all thinking, well, how do we save a few seats? Rescue a few seats here. But the thing is that Justin Trudeau had this theory that if they could get NDP votes, then they would win the election. And he was right about that. His method, though, of getting there was saying, we're going to kill resource development. We're going to kill everything from pipelines to aquaculture. And we're going to talk about social justice a whole lot. We ended up with an economy that was like in the ones in terms of growth. And it turns out that New Democrats, as well as a lot of other Canadians, decided, well, you know what? We want jobs. We don't want to be just talked down to. We don't want someone standing in the way of growth. We want jobs. And so, Carney comes in with a proven record on that. Trump on the other side threatening the country. People wanted stability. They wanted to get somebody serious, and they wanted jobs. And so, it was an utterly unexpected outcome. But I think, one where Canadians really decided we got to do a U-turn here, but they wanted somebody serious. And that's how Mark Carney was finally elected at the end of the day. Shocked me as much as everybody else. Unlike some other members of this panel, I might be more happy about it, though, than they are.
Tony, as you look back over the last 8 months, we haven't even hit a year yet since the election or since the Liberal leadership race. What do you think the Prime Minister is doing well, and what do you think he's not doing well?
Yeah, and let me preface my answer, Vashi, by saying that Canadians are reasonable and patient people, so they're going to give Mark Carney the benefit of the doubt for the first segment of his mandate, and that's what Canadians do, and I respect that, and I think all Conservatives respect the election result, despite a little bit of angst about how it all turned out. Having said that, I think that Mark Carney is good at illustrating a changed direction, whether it's on natural resources or on the carbon tax or saying things about fiscal probity in the federal budget. I think the jury, I'm saying this in a very neutral way, but the jury is still out on whether he can achieve all of those things. But again, Canadians are patient. They're going to give him the time. Whether he can do all those things that he says he can do is, in my view, an open question. And there certainly is some evidence that some of them are counter to one another. So I think ultimately Mark Carney is going to have to make decisions. That's what you do in the Prime Minister's chair. And then he will be judged accordingly.
I think one of the things that we've talked about on this panel pretty frequently, Marco, is the size of the ambition described, right? Like the magnitude of it is certainly not what we're used to in politics. I know James has made this point a couple of times, like just saying, we're going to have the fastest growing economy in the G7, and it's going to be this, it's going to be that. These are not usually we set expectations low in politics so that they can be surpassed. How big of a challenge do you think that's going to be for the Prime Minister moving forward?
I think it will be a challenge. I mean, to use the old adage, we campaign in poetry and we govern in prose. And I think managing expectations and executing and delivery will be crucial for 2026. But as I've been watching some of the clips that you've been playing throughout the show so far, I mean, it's a bit of a photo album for me, a bit personal. And it, is encapsulated by a sort of a never say never mentality. A year ago, the Liberal Party was 20 points down. Most people were writing us off into oblivion. I'd announced that I wasn't going to be running again, and then a short few weeks into 2026 had been asked to be the Prime Minister's first Chief of Staff. And, there was a clip there which I think also really captures one of the most pivotal moments in the first months of his tenure, and that was in that bilateral in the Oval Office. And I'm standing over the shoulder of the Prime Minister as he's having his first interactions with Donald Trump. And there was one never, and that was that Canada would never be for sale. And to me, I think that was a real watershed moment to signal to Canadians and to the American administration that this is a Prime Minister who understands how to crisis manage. I mean, he has spent the better part of his professional life doing just that. 2008, in the Great Recession, serving alongside of Prime Minister Harper, and then going to the UK and helping, England navigate Brexit. And so he seems to have been engineered for this moment. And all of the repositioning that we have seen of the Liberal Party, a party that is much more focused on the economy, a party that I think is much more relatable in some ways in this current moment, because Canadians are apprehensive. They are anxious about the cost of living and about their future. I think all of that energy is striking a chord with a lot of Canadians. And I want to come back to what James said about the tectonic plates shifting. I think there is also a profound shifting in the tectonic plates that form the political coalitions that make up this government. And so I think 2026 is going to be an interesting year.
Do you think that's the case, James? That, I mean, I think to maybe put like even a finer point on it, Canadians might be asking themselves, like, are we in for a two-party system for the foreseeable future? Like, is it going to be an option between Liberals and Conservatives who, from a policy perspective, have less of a contrast than they did a year and a half ago?
As usual, Vashi, I think you put your finger on it, and I agree with Marco. I think for Prime Minister Carney, we'll talk about Pierre, I think, in a later segment. But as I think about Prime Minister Carney going into 2026, I think he has a decision to make. Christie mentioned about the coalition that came together to get him elected in April of this year, and it really was, he has borrowed voters from progressives who really didn't like Donald Trump and who really didn't like Pierre Poilievre and the idea of him becoming Prime Minister. And a lot of progressive voters lent their votes to Mark Carney in a defensive posture, and they're waiting to see some receipts, and they're not getting a lot of receipts. You see a Prime Minister who is increasing military spending to $81 billion, who's buying F-35s, we think, but growing procurement in any event, is offending the center-left progressive environmental movement with his moves on carbon pricing and so on. So, I mean, and he's pro-pipeline now, et cetera. So I think for Prime Minister Carney, as he goes into 2026, and he thinks about the mandate and where it came from in April of 2025, 2026 is about, is he going to do a progressive pivot and try to retain those NDP voters, or is he going to double down and really be a progressive conservative? If he's going to do a progressive pivot, I think you have to look in the first half of certainly 2026 and see if he's going to tack left on other things that he hasn't talked about yet, whether it's, culture policy, whether it's standing up to the Americans on the online streaming app. There are things that he can do on social policy, maybe a guaranteed annual income, expanded childcare. I don't know. But is he going to do a progressive pivot and try to hold on to those NDP voters, or is he going to try and seize the middle ground and become really kind of a blue, liberal, red, Tory, progressive, conservative, and try to straddle the broad middle? And is that ground available? There's a because he can't have both. He has to choose. And I think politically we'll see what he does in 26.
Just very quickly, a quick follow-up. Do you think that ground is available?
We'll see. I mean, I think there are a lot of Canadians. I think Marco touched on it, right? There are a lot of Canadians who have shed their old partisan fight because they realize that Donald Trump really is something different. He's not just another president. And when Canadians, as Christie said, they want the Prime Minister to broaden our global market access and sell our products to more than just 97% of what we sell for energy goes to the United States. They want to see it to go to more countries, not just because we need to, but because we want to. We don't want to just sell to Americans anymore, not just because it's a better economic opportunity, but because we're offended. We're not a 51st state. We're an independent, proud country with a sturdy past and a bright future, and we don't want to do business with Americans right now. And we're not going to do it for a long time. And so I think a lot of people are prepared to shed the old sort of culture war, partisan, red, blue, orange veneer that we have on politics and fight a fight that's worth fighting, which is putting country first. And I think there's a great appeal to that. And I think the Prime Minister he has some choices to make about how he holds that together.